Now we'll have Richard Horrobin from Bruce Power come and speak with us. Richard, welcome. Thank you.
My name is Richard Horrobin. Ted and I have worked together for a long time now, and I think, as Ted mentioned, one of the things that's been most refreshing for me since Jeff Lyash and Mike Renchek came on board, the two CEOs for the respective companies, has been just a tremendous sense of collaboration, and you heard some of that today. And I'll try not to make sure I cover off the same materials as Ted, but there are a few things I do want to highlight which may be relevant to what you're thinking and what you're considering today in terms of resilience. I do have some slides. I'm going to flick through these as just part of the conversation today. But maybe just before I get started here, how many people are familiar with Bruce Power? Okay, so a good number of you anyway. That's great to hear. So that saves me some of the introductory comments anyway in terms of Bruce Power. As Ted said, the great thing about nuclear power here in Ontario is it represents probably about 60% of the generation, 50-60% of the generation at any point in time on any given day. And certainly from a carbon perspective, I think that's tremendous for the system overall. When we look at when Bruce Power sort of steps back and we look at our performance in 2017, I think it really starts with safety. We're a strong safety. Safety is our number one priority as an organization, and so when we start to consider, nuclear's role in society, what gives us that social license to operate is really a strong safety record. Last year we made an interesting change. What we were trying to do is really to try and make safety personal to individuals, and so we introduced an initiative, and it's much more than an initiative. It's really something that's focused on a cultural change within the organization. Our view is that safety is something that you take personally. It's about you doing the right thing every step, every time, every day. And so we introduced this campaign, this initiative across the organization, really with the concept of driving home the importance of safety, not just when you're operating at the facility, but when you actually leave that facility and you go home. And so the idea here is we all come to work, obviously, and what we want to do is leave work and go home and see our friends and family safely at the end of each day. We focus on safety, obviously, because it gives us that social license to operate the facility, but also it's important because the best performing plants are also the safest plants in the world. And so from our perspective, safety translates into strong financial and business results. Last year, from our perspective, was a good demonstration of that. We achieved a record output across the site. We generated over 50 terawatt hours at the facility. Just to put that into perspective, it's about a third of the generation here in Ontario across the year. But to put that in perspective, when I first came to the site, when I first came over, I actually used to work for a nuclear generator in England. When I came over and we first took on the lease of the facility at Bruce Power, we had 4 units operating. Now we have 8 units operating, and we've basically doubled the output from the site. And I'll show you some slides later on that look at the cost of generation from the site. That's a tremendous benefit, not just to the ratepayers here in Ontario, it's a tremendous benefit to business as well. So when you think about resilience and you think about the definition of resilience and the ability to bounce back and demonstrate toughness, when I talk about resilience and in terms of Bruce Power's performance, what I want to focus in on is the track record that we've been able to demonstrate in bouncing back from a situation where basically the predecessor Ontario Hydro had mothballed 4 of our units. We've since restarted those units, brought them back online, and that's brought benefits not just to the local community, but also to the province as a whole. But we've also demonstrated that brings real community benefits as well. So when we talk about our future, we also look at a sustainable future based on realizing the benefits that we have from the contract that we now have with the system operator. You know, one of the things that I touched on there was the importance of, you know, we basically doubled our output over the course of the last 15 years or so since we took on the lease of the facility. And the reason why that's important when you look at it from an economical perspective is if you look at the price of nuclear power from both on, whether it's from ourselves or from OPG, the price of power from nuclear is, as you can see here, 6.9 cents a kilowatt hour. You know, and that compares extremely favorably then with other forms of generation here in the province of Ontario. So solar, you see, is high at 48 cents a kilowatt hour. Gas and wind high relative to that, and of course Ontario and hydro. Of course, we do get the benefit of the Runner River hydro, which means we see hydro as being a very effective source of generation. So overall, doubling the amount of output from the site has been a tremendously important. Like I say, it drives economic and social benefits as well. And this is really, Ted talked about some of the benefits to the environment. And here what we saw was with the retirement of and phase out of coal was the role that nuclear played within the province of Ontario. And here, you know, as I said, when we first came to the site, our output was around, on an annual basis, 2003 is a good year to look at there, was around 25 terawatt hours. And this year, if you continue this trend here, this trend continues upwards and actually achieve 50 terawatt hours. And again, from an environmental perspective, that brings tremendous benefits, not just because of the clean environment, but also the impact that has on healthcare as well. We talked about the social benefits that arrive from the investment that's being made at the facility and the investment that OPG is also putting into the community. At Bruce Power, since we took on the facility in 2001, we've invested over $11 billion. I'm not sure how many of you have seen $11 billion. It's a lot of money. And as part of the long-term refurbishment program that we're actually engaging in now, we intend to invest a further $13 billion. Now that's $13 billion in addition then to the annualized $1 billion spend that we have on an ongoing basis as well. So a tremendous investment which is creating then benefits both immediately around the facility and also within the broader community of Ontario. As Ted mentioned, one of the benefits that we have here in Ontario is a very strong supply chain, and as a consequence, we're able to leverage that to realize strength in the way we execute work and see the benefits of the investment that we're making spread across Ontario. I can see I'm fighting with the window cleaning here. Hopefully you can still hear me anyway. Let me just talk about, I talked about community resilience. Let me just talk about that for a minute. If you think about the impact, for those of you familiar with Bruce Power is based on the shores of Lake Huron, and it's served really by two towns principally. There's Kincardine and further to the north, Port Elgin. So those two communities, yes, it's a strong rural community, but if you think about the economy in that area, the economy is driven by the success of the site. So when a decision was made previously by Ontario Hydro to mothball 4 of the units, so we have two facilities at the Bruce site, Bruce A, Bruce B. Bruce A was mothballed, and so there was only one operational station, which was Bruce B, the newer station. So what happened then, if you think about the economic impact of that, as you saw, one half of the facility effectively shut down, that created a tremendous impact to that local community. What's happened since then, since we took on the facility and have invested that $11 billion, we're able to see that strength in the community return, and also opportunity be created, both from a business perspective, but also importantly from a people perspective as well. You know, when I first started working at Bruce Power, the average age was 49. I think if you looked at our average demographics now, our average age is 42. You know, we've recruited probably over 2,000 people in the last 10 years. So it provides a tremendous opportunity. The opportunity I think we have, and this is when we talk about resilience, the opportunity that we have at the Bruce site now is to make sure that we capitalize on the opportunity ahead of us. We have a long-term agreement in place with the system operator, the ISO. That agreement allows us to run out to 2064. I don't know if you look across how many businesses you work with, but who can say that they've effectively got a license to operate out to 2064? It's a tremendous opportunity. The challenge with that is that when you look at the opportunity that's presented, the opportunity is there for us to realize it is not a guaranteed opportunity. And for us to be successful, you know, Ted talked about, you know, and it's great to hear our colleagues talk about their project being on time, on budget. That's what we have to do as the norm. You know, and we were the first people to put a hand up and say, hey, we have not got this right in the past. You know, if I go back to our last refurbishment, we refurbished 2 units previously, units 1 and 2. And we keep the numbers simple. We have 8 units, so we refurbished 1 and 2. And we spent about $5 billion on that refurbishment. The challenge with that was that refurbishment was only supposed to cost $2.75 billion. So it came in late, and it was significantly over budget. Our challenge, in order to realize the opportunity here, is to make sure we do, as OPG are doing, is deliver each of the projects that we have on time, on budget. Absolutely essential for us as a business. And it's essential that when we think about resiliency, we also think about lessons learned. So we're collaborating with OPG, we're learning from them, they learn from us through some of the costly lessons that we learned through our last refurbishment. They've taken on board, we've shared all of those lessons, and there's a great deal of cooperation going on now so that we can make sure that we're successful, not just for today, but for the future. And the reason why that's so important for us is not just because it means from a business perspective, we can continue to obviously pay back the money invested from a shareholder perspective. We can continue to generate that cheap electricity, cheap, clean electricity for the province of Ontario. But also just from a personal perspective, it means that we can provide opportunities long-term, good-paying jobs to the people in our local community. One of the things that we specifically looked for as we set about our refurbishment program is actually asking our supply chain to be local. We've said, it's great, we've got this great opportunity, we want to capitalize on that by bringing some of your investment local to our facility. The reason why we're doing that is sustainability. From our perspective, we will be more sustainable if we have our local supply chain around us working as part of an integrated project team to deliver success on the projects. The reason why it's so critical is because in the transaction that we have with the system operator, there are off-ramps. There are off-ramps along the way. We've identified where those off-ramps are here on this diagram. So as we progress through the project, if we're not successful, or if we're not on time, on budget, if we're not able to make sure that we deliver not just the major component replacement work that we're doing successfully, but if we're not able to operate the rest of the facility at a price that keeps our price of power competitive, then we face the potential for economic off-ramps along the way here. And what that would mean is it would mean the early retirement or the early closure of the facility relative to running this out to 2064. So critical for us when we think about resilience, when we think about sustainability, is to learn from the lessons of the past, capitalize on those, build a strong community to help support the facility on a go-forward basis, use the supply chain that we have around us to deliver economic benefit across Ontario, but also to make sure that in the long term, we are successful here. one of the things that we're talking about, and I know I'm going to run out of time here, so I'm going to just a couple more minutes if I could. The reason why it's so important that we also collaborate with our colleagues at OPG is because when you look at the schedule that we have for refurbishment in the case of OPG, at Bruce Power we call our projects MCR projects, major component replacement projects. We're really only replacing the guts of the reactor. It sounds easy when you say that, but we've really tried to simplify the work we're executing in order to try and ensure that we are more successful in the execution of that work. But what you can see here is there is clearly overlap of not just schedules within each organization, but across the organizations as well. And so it's essential, when we talk about collaboration, we have a call every 2 weeks between the executive team where we talk about performance and how things are going and how work's progressing and what we can do to help. One of the things we look at from a supply chain perspective is we look at people. So we look at what's the capacity within the industry to support this, and where do we need to reach out and look to gain extra strength in that regard. We do the same from a parts perspective, so people, parts. We also look at it from a performance perspective. Are we seeing the same standards of performance? If we're seeing challenges in performance, how do we address those? How can we work together to make sure that when we talk to our suppliers, they also see the same level of interaction between the organizations and have the same level of experience? And then finally, we focus in on making sure that collectively we're successful in this endeavor. I know I've run out of time. So I'll be available afterwards if during the break any of you have any other questions. I really appreciate the time to speak to you this morning. I was standing in for a colleague of mine, Kevin Kelly, who unfortunately is unable to make it, but does send his regards. Like I say, I'll be available afterwards if you do have any questions. Thank you.